Thanks for the introduction, David. I have been doing LLMs. My first LLM app was a tool to take Swagger specs, that's a open API, not OpenAI, open API spec, and it describes a interface or, with the different various calls. So the pet store Swagger spec is the typical example that's given. You could see which pets are available, you could adopt a pet, you could change statuses of an adoption, things like that. So essentially what my app did is you gave it the JSON spec and it was able to, you could ask questions on it and do that. I did this in 2023. This was GPT-4 8K, if people remember that particular model. That was a long time ago. In LLM years, this is punch card era. So this is really going back. Okay, so this talk is just random stuff that happens to work for me. It changes based on the week. And there is no one solution. If anyone tells you that this is the way to use AI or LLMs, I would be very skeptical of that. We're going to look at some demos, what works, what doesn't work, and we're going to see some things that actually I didn't realize until I went through and saw if it actually is helpful or not. And I'll describe the methodology as follows. So what I did was I said, I have this idea. I think this is going to be an improvement for usage for AI, for LLMs. And I had Claude run the experiment. So I would say, here's a project, introduce a TypeScript error and fix it. And then I would do it with the TypeScript compiler attached to it and without the TypeScript compiler attached to it and see how good it was at doing that. And I was able to basically grade every one of these different things to see what works, what doesn't work. Okay, so yeah, and some of these things I thought would be an obvious improvement and was not. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so the first idea is to build feedback loops. I think the last time, Walter Shub gave a speak in the talk in Muncie. I think that was also on AI, and I think I also mentioned that, and that was a big conversation piece. So what that means is the typical example I give is just running the TypeScript compiler on the project. You'll make a change, run the TypeScript compiler. If things broke because I changed a type definition or I expanded how this variable could be used, I want that'll cascade through the whole project, and Claude can't really see all that, but compilers are very good at deterministically figuring out if this project is in a good state or not. So that's what you want to do. So there are two flavors of doing that. One is to basically say, run the TypeScript compiler, and assume it'll listen to you. It's pretty good about it nowadays. It used to be terrible at it. The other one is to use hooks, and this is a Claude-specific thing, but there are different flavors of this for other things. If you're using an agent that does not have hooks, you could throw a proxy in the middle and then kind of do the same thing. That is not recommended, but it is an option. Okay, and now we're going to see what this looks like. So, okay, that does work. Hopefully the screen is big enough. So the demo is basically add a type to an enum and see what happens. So it's going to do that. It added a type. And now it's done. And now it's going to run the compiler. The compiler returned with an error because there's somewhere else that this is being used that it didn't know about. And then it's able to fix it up, and that's it. And now it's able to get to that point. Okay, so that's one option. The other option is, people don't realize this, but Claude Code actually has a VS Code integration. And if you use that, then you automatically get the VS Code itself speaking to Claude if there are syntax errors or things like that in the code in the editor itself. So it's more intelligent. It doesn't need to run all those linting and build and stuff like that.
Doesn't Claude natively have LSP?
Claude, I think that's a recent-ish thing, yeah. But that doesn't give you linting. It doesn't give you other stuff as well. Like if it doesn't have a closing brace, it'll realize that right away, or it has to first ask for.
Probably has to ask.
Yeah, but this is automatic because it edits it in VS Code, and VS Code is now going to know it and then tell Claude. If you actually watch, it says, VS Code told me there's errors, and like it's like automatic, which is a nice integration. Okay, that is the first tip. The second tip, and this is also another flavor of giving a feedback loop, is to give it eyes. So you want to, when you write code, you write the code. Talking about UI development, you write the code, you open it in a browser, and you see how it looks. It doesn't look right, you iterate. You change the code, you see how it looks, and that back and forth. So instead of you doing all that back and forth, and some people they'll write some code they'll ask Claude to do something, get the answer, and then try it, and then send a screenshot to Claude, and then go back and forth and keep doing that. But you could just skip that and just tell Claude how to open a web page. So this is MCP tools. Everyone's heard of that, I hope. Playwright is probably the most popular one. There's actually a Chrome DevTools one as well. So this is not going to be a demo because I couldn't record like this type of thing. But I gave it a test of open a page, look at how things, look at what I'm trying to do, see what's broken, fix it, and keep going. This was the before picture, and this was the after picture. I didn't tell it what was wrong. I just said, I don't know what the problem is. Use a browser, figure it out, and fix it. And it's able to do that. I've been using this tremendously when it comes to complex layouts that have some div is not scrolling for some reason, and it's on a resizable pane, and it's there's flex layout, and I have Monaco editors with auto hiding, and it's just all that complexity. I don't have to try to describe it because I know Claude could just reach into the browser and see what the divs look like. So that makes things very easy. Okay, another thing, tests go out of sync very, very fast. And LLMs writing documentation make this problem even worse. Well, everyone says the first thing they do is oh, look how great LLMs are. Look at my project and make documentation for everything. And it does a great job. And then they'll never ask it to write documentation again. So the documentation they had 3 months ago is still there, way into the project's completely looking different. And so it never gets stayed in sync. On the other hand, if you have a test, tests are run in CI or locally or whenever, and those are forced to be in sync. So you want to spec out your project based on end-to-end tests, jest tests, whatever flavor it looks like, rather than documentation. Okay, so yeah, I think I spoke about all this. All right, so Claude is really, really good about writing tests, especially end-to-end Playwright tests. It knows Playwright has been on the bleeding edge of LLMs. Playwright has a testing framework as well before they did LLM work, so they're really good about that. So let's see what that looks like. So over here, I'm having it just write test for a smart parser. This is something that I had. We're assuming this existed. And okay, we'll fast forward a little bit. Okay, it wrote a bunch of tests. It ran the tests, saw that it failed. It's going to fix the issue. And these are very LLM-friendly tests. Like write a parser to take slugs from a URL is the most hello world of LLM tests you can give it. There's no, that is such a well-understood problem. If you have a more complex task of, some crazy business logic with some weird edge case, that's going to be a much harder thing to do. But so you have to look with everything with a grain of salt over here. Okay. Okay. The next tip is that you want to tell the LLM what to do and let it figure out how to do it. This is one of the important parts of you want to get out of LLM's way. So there's something called the YOLO flag, or YOLO mode. That is when you do dangerously skip permissions. It will yell at you if you do this with root on the root profile. And technically you're not supposed to, but come on. Just use common sense. If you have a Vite project, you're not having it read your emails where people are trying to throw prompt injection in there. If it's a well understood area and you control all the data, don't worry about it. It's fine. Especially the newer ones are pretty good about, even if someone would try to inject some stuff in, they're supposed to be able to detect it. I've never tried it, but that I wouldn't do, and I mostly do this on like remote workstations where the worst it could do is like run some curl commands, potentially as me if it really knew what I was doing, but like it can't like format my hard drive locally. Okay, so I ran two different experiments over here. One was having to sit and watch Claude do its thing and to manually prove it, and one of them just on YOLO mode. And the difference was pretty, it's like a 3x improvement in just speed, even if you're just clicking yes all the time. So this is what it looks like. I probably should have done those last two things out of order and swapped around. I think this is right in the validators. Okay, well, it does that. And then, yeah, so this is, this one ran 3 times faster. I don't know if I have that. I probably got lost one in the edits. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so so far we've been looking at single instances of running Claude and having it do one thing once, one at a time. Claude is also able to multitask. And not only is it able to multitask, it's able to fork itself essentially and to spread out a workload among different worker threads. So recently, they always had this thing, agents, but subtask, but now they have a new concept called agents. And this is behind a flag that you have to actually set in the environment variable in your settings file or something. But when you do that, you get a it's alpha, but it's insanely powerful. So what that looks like is you give it a task and you could describe what the team looks like, but you don't have to. And if you don't, right, this is what it looks like. Okay, so let's just read this out. Okay, so I want to build out a thing with various different subsections and do things. So this is very much a placeholder. I've done a similar thing where I've given it my UI application that doesn't have enough tests as it should, and I said, go to every single page on this, split it into different worker threads, go to every single clickable link, every button, anything you see, try it out, see what it does, and document it. And then I had a giant file, a spec file, and then I was able to create tests for that. And I had it write end-to-end tests for each module. It also split that out. And then I had it run those tests and make sure they pass. Then I created a PR with that, ran it in CI, saw what failed, told it what failed, so that part was a little out of the loop because CI is a little tricky to get in there. And then I was able to fix them and have that working. And now I have 100 and some odd tests of a fully working program in CI with video documentation essentially. So this is another way of having documentation in the form of tests.
So you codified all your bugs?
Essentially. That was one of the concerns, especially because one of the things I have is screenshot testing. And those are extremely flaky because I think the delta is 3 pixels. Yeah, it's pretty rough. But I also have it that in CI, it will get the updated Goldens and have you run a command to be able to update it, which actually was a Google-esque thing.
And you don't even look at it, right?
No comment. Yeah, so over here, the way this is running, let's see if that works. Well, these are all pre-recorded, so it's going to work. But okay, let's see what it does. That is going to, so this is essentially it's going to create it initially by itself, and then it's going to create different workers to do different things. So one's a documentation writer worker, one is a test runner worker, and the other is a README, a handler writer. Yeah, I'm not even sure what the difference is. But all these different things. And this could be, you could split it by feature, you could split it up by task. I had, one thing I did was I created a Veep plugin that allows platform-specific UI development to happen locally, and I wanted to know how robust it was. So I had it I had to create 5 worker threads, take a random UI project, clone it, add the plugin, launch the project, go see if it was accessible in the browser without it having its own auth, and then adding a screenshot of the running application to a list of screenshots. And that is a lot of steps for a person to do. But to be able to have an LLM be able to do that autonomously was extremely powerful.
So how many agents are we useful? I'm saying like too many agents would be.
Right. So
at one point it'll be too many.
So I created a workstation, and I could choose the sizing, and I just made it a monster workstation. And then the task was I had it create 5 workers, and it was basically a worker pool, and it basically had 50 tasks, let's say, and it would take a task, run it, and when it's done, grab the next task and run it. So essentially, it's a worker pool of 5 workers running down a list of tasks, and so it couldn't run more than 5 at once. 5, I think, was a probably decent place, but the Claude was actually the thing that was crashing. So go figure. Even though like these applications are monstrous, and Claude should not have been the bottleneck. But that just goes to show that Claude code is really not optimized. It's kind of embarrassing. But especially when you have long conversations, Claude is going to very much struggle. I probably should look into the new terminal. What's the new terminal everyone's using? No, the terminal emulator. Like iterm. Like iterm tune, there's a new one. Ghosty, there we go. Yeah, that one. So I think that's really, really fast, and it probably will solve a lot of these problems, but I haven't tried it yet. Also, because I use the Claude that's part of the terminal of VS Code, so I'm not switching so fast.
Does it balloon cost to use sub-agents like that? Because every sub-agent you're bringing in all the default contacts every single time.
I'm sure it costs someone something. Doesn't cost me.
Because I see you using 4.6 with 1 million contacts window.
Yeah, it's
Pretty expensive.
yeah. I'm sure it's a line item somewhere.
So you pay for API for that, or prescription?
My company does. My company does.
How can I persuade my company?
Send me your resume. I'll put in a referral.
Ghosty is for Windows or not?
I think it's like Ming-U type of thing if you want to use for Windows, probably. It's like it's meant for Linux, but I'm sure it works on Windows also.
So you described how many agents you wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and then it went ahead and orchestrated those agents
Yeah.
across the various tasks.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to explain exactly how I did that. So I basically had one Claude file. This Claude file said, we are doing this task. We are testing this plugin. We are going to have, here's a list of 300 projects. Randomly pick one, like shuffle them, pick the first 50, and then we're going to split that into 5 worker threads. Each worker thread is now going to launch Claude again as a sub-process, and that is a level 3 Claude. And in the Claude file, I said, here is what level 1 Claude does. Here is what level 2 Claude does. Here is what level 3 Claude does. And the first thing I tell it to do is, you are level 2 with this project. Go read the Claude file and go on. And that was it. So that was, I didn't have to have the prompt Claude 1 prompting Claude 2 with all this context. I just pointed at the file that has everything it needs and just let it go. Okay, so I think I spoke about all that. And this is a great thing because as documentation updates, as you see something's not working, you update the Claude file, and everyone could read everyone else's instructions. Like level 3s are allowed to know about level 1s. It's not their job, but it does give them helpful context to know, oh, this is like the overall task. So I'm not going to focus on this dumb little bug I see along the way because that's not what the goal here is. So it is very helpful in that regard also, and it kind of starts having just compounded returns on things like that. Okay, LLMs are really good at doing tasks. They are terrible at coming up with ideas of how to do those tasks. They will do it very enterprisely, for lack of a better word. They'll, keep throwing if statements at the problem until they solve it. They won't take a step back and say, hold on a second, I'm approaching this the wrong way. So you need to kind of step in sometimes and just be the adult in the room and say, you're doing this terribly, here's another way to look at it. Or, I feel like this is a little bit of a hack, could we reevaluate it? And things like that, just like reset its operating mode for that. Another thing, if you want to do something that's mildly interesting, they're really bad at coming up with ideas like that. For example, if I'll give a random example I had recently. There's a project that has a express router, and I want to be able to use that in my project but their express router is completely untyped. So I want to, this example's gonna go off the rails very fast, so I'm gonna skip it. Basically, I want to use a type system in a really unique way to be able to do that, and I'm gonna use type assertions and box classes to do that, and LLMs will have no idea what that even means, but if I give it like a really small 10-line example and say run with this, it's really good about doing that. Okay, so yeah, 10 lines is all it needs to understand like what you're trying to accomplish. If you try to explain it in English, it's probably not going to work. Give a small proof of concept in code that works, and that will get you very, very far. If you say write tests and you see it's just going for jest tests and mocking out things and you don't want it to mock it out, you want it to be more end-to-end, or it's doing too little mocking out, you want more end-to-end, give it an example of like a prototypical test that you want to do and have it go from there. It's really good about doing that. LLMs are not smart. They are very good workers. They are not good thinkers, not creative at all. So that is something that's come from you for now, and that is what our main job is when we're working with LLMs this closely. Okay, a bunch of random stuff here. Plan mode is really good, but you should look at it and see that it makes sense. Don't do it because that's one of the things you have to do, and then switch and then have it do it. There's a purpose for it. It is good for its internal monologue. It's basically thinking mode on steroids, but you still want to look at it.
4.6 started entering plan mode on its own.
Sorry, what?
Opus 4.6, they started entering plan mode on its own.
It does, but not on YOLO mode.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about YOLO mode.
YOLO, yeah, it does not. It could sometimes.
You would say use Opus 4.6 in Claude Code by default, or it's too much or too...
Depending on the thing, you can run that kind of.
I use Claude 4.6 on YOLO mode with high thinking on fast mode.
What is fast mode? I'm sorry.
With emerging context.
With emerging context. Yeah. This is very much worth it for my employer, no matter how much it costs.
Are you the reason why Netflix has gotten more expensive?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so another thing you want to do is you want to use the tools that are forcing your code into a well-defined structure that is auditable. So generally that means the type system, right? That is something, if you have untyped things and you're just like using just vanilla JavaScript without TypeScript, or you just like have no type enforcement in your TypeScript, things could morph a little bit too freely, and you don't really need that flexibility for LLM written code. LLM is very good at if it needs to, we tend to do it because we're lazy. Like I have a string, I want a number, I'm just gonna convert it to a number. LLMs, and we'll do it unsafely. LLMs will actually parse in, throw an error if it's not a number, right? Like if it's gonna do it, so just let it do it. It's technically the better way to do it, so lean into it using those annoying practices that it just does by default. Yeah, this is just like some Claude specific things. You could have slash commands and other things. Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about and I want to focus on is when you use LLMs, there is two parts to it. There's the work that it does to get to a point, and then there's the result. You want to focus on the result. And you don't, the how it got there is not so important. So you should audit the result. And if the result is code that you are going to put in your project, you need to look at that. If the result is a script, if your task is to rename all the files, you don't care how nice that script looks. And if it's anything like that, it doesn't matter what it is, that intermediary steps. So don't focus on it, but you should focus it if it does matter. I'll give a couple of examples. If I go back a couple of slides, this thing over here, this is a different window. This is an askinema. I don't know how to pronounce that. It basically askinema, I think. Is it right over? Basically, it's a screen recording in ASCII. So this is not a video. This is I could actually highlight. Oh, you can't see. Can you see that? You see, you don't see me highlighting because I have to go to this browser. Over here, you see, I could actually copy. I could select the text. This is a video essentially in a slide deck, which I've never used it before. This is slide dev, It's a Vue project. It's really, really cool. But if you ever seen like a slide deck with a video embedded in it, you have to click the video and then you have to unfocus from the thing and then go to the video and then full screen the video, things like that. One of the tasks that I had this do was to sync. So I have two screens here. This is the screen that you're looking at, and I'm looking at the screen with the notes. I am pressing play on the screen with the notes. It is syncing to the screen that you're looking at. It is doing that somehow because I asked Claude to make that work, right? And Claude is doing that because Claude created a Veep plugin that opens a socket, a WebSocket server that keeps a two-way communication in there. Would I have written it that way? Probably not, but I don't care because I care about the result that I can now sync my slides between two different windows. Right, so that is an example of something that it's really good at, and I don't care how it got there. As long as it gets the job done, that's it. If the result was that I needed to now check in this code, I would look at the code, and now I care about that result. The artifact is important. The point to get to the artifact is not important. That's the point I want to make here. Okay. So I wanted to touch on things that I thought would actually help, but actually did not. And this could just be because LLMs got better and some of these things were just not needed. So I had two different ways of doing Playwright, and actually I had a third way I also tried. Playwright has CLI mode. So Playwright CLI is a package that is not the Playwright MCP, and I think they're trying to replace the MCP. And I had Claude run an experiment to see if it actually is better, because they claim it is. And Claude said it's actually not better. And I had a different concept with Playwright scripts where I want my projects to, instead of using the Playwright MCP, which is very expensive and hard to make deterministic use cases, deterministic tests for different things, like if I'm able to create a bug because it follows a specific amount of steps, getting it to follow the same exact steps without it having to write a script to do it is actually really hard. So write the script to try to repro the bug and then fix it and then make sure the script passes. I call that a throwaway test, a throwaway Playwright script. So actually, I thought those would be a lot more efficient. They're actually not, because that back and forth that Playwright has of just being in the loop as Playwright is running is really powerful. So that was surprising.
How do you take care of the problem of non-consistent steps taken, things about it?
So I had that when I had like a race condition when I have a net request loading a filter for a dropdown. And when that loaded fresh data, it would unset the state, right? So that was one of the few times where I needed like speed there to be able to beat the race condition. It always took 3 seconds to load, but the MCP is not necessarily faster. But a script that is loading the page, clicking it, and then the thing's going to load, that's always going to happen.
How does it uses the MCP by just sending it commands, I guess, or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make sure that the next time it runs the same exact commands?
So for those type of things, then you would write a script. I would tell it to write a Playwright script that loads the page and repros the bug and then fix it once you have that script in place that you're able to repro. One of the things I did is I got a bug report that I couldn't repro. And I said, and it was like almost the same, along the same lines, like there was this, you open this field and this other thing loads in and the thing closes. And I said, I can't repro it, can you try? And it said, no, I wasn't able to. I told it to write a script to do it. And then I said, it could be something about navigations happening also. Maybe they're hitting, like the hash state is changing or something. Play around with that. That's all I told it. And it was able to repro it eventually, which is like shocking. And it was able to fix it. I was able to fix it with that. So that is, I was really impressed with it, the ability to do that. And that would be a script. That is a very specialized use case of a browser. Most of the time, it's load the page, click the thing, see if it works, and then if it doesn't, why didn't it work? I don't have to, it's not really that hard. Like the data didn't load. Why didn't the data load? Because, you have the wrong path, you had something else. So that's usually what it comes down to. That's most of the time, that's what it is. And, Claude itself was recognizing that that is 90% of the time. 10% of the time, you will need, one-off scripts, but most of the time not. Okay, the Claude file, if you have a specific task like the 3 levels of Clauding that I was describing before, that is really good with with the Claude file, but don't be too specific. Don't force it into the solution. Describe the problem, let it explore it. One of the things I always say is experiment, try things out, do web searches, try different experiments, create sub-agents to, just research things, and, when you're ready, come back with an answer, and I don't even look at it anymore. I'll look at it in like 20 minutes.
I want to understand, if Claude can read my code, what is the benefit of the MD file?
If Claude could read your code,
Yeah, you can see all the whole project, so...
if you could look at all the code and understand your project, that's pretty good. That's when you have 400 files and you have all these different modules that do different things, and you have all this complexity. It's
No, when I want to do one thing, I have this 10 files, let's say, and it needs to focus on this 10 files, so
how does it know which 10 files?
you will know where to look.
How do you know where to look? You need authentication, so you have to go into the auth middleware, and then you also need the GraphQL endpoints. You have to look at the resolver, and
I tried it, so...
yeah, I'm saying there's a lot of different. You have all the context. So for you, it's only having those 10 files, but you also happen to know 30 other files that you didn't think matter, but since you know them already, you didn't think about it. But you need all that. If you were to sit down a new person and tell him to do that, he would have to know all 50 files. So that's what a Claude file is for. Something that's able to describe the overall project and the overall structure of how things work. So yeah, that's. But you could have it explore the code base very extensively to create a file and to iterate that way. That's a decent starting point. Another thing, Claude, and this is a Claude code-ism. Claude -p, that's like the minus print thing. It's really bad with piping and for streaming results. And it's to the point of where it's useless if you want to do anything that's more iterative and less iterable, I would say. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. I've essentially created a MCP tool to be able to have Claude run Claude, and it runs interactively. It's called tmuxer, and it just basically runs Claude with the in tmux, and then it's able to send keys to it, and it literally types into the terminal session, and it sees the results and things like that. So there was no other way to do it really, because it's the -p flag just doesn't give output until the very end, and you want to be able to see intermediate steps because you don't want it to spend 10 minutes and go on the wrong solution and then finally find out. So stuff like that is helpful. All these demos were created essentially with that. I basically had Claude Code write a record.sh file, and that uses tmux to be able to generate all these things. And I said the text is too small, make it bigger. I'm giving a demo, and it would change the columns and the rows to make it. Then I said, oh, that looks terrible in a browser. For the slides, fix it, and it opened the browser and saw what looks wrong and fixed it. It was a little bit more back and forth than that, but essentially, I didn't write this slide deck, and this slide deck's all code. So, but the result is the slide deck. That's all I care about. I don't care about how the code looks. So, that's just an idea of how to frame these type of problems and how to view LLM usage in general. Okay, and those are my slides and questions.
I've never used Claude because I only recently started actually spending money on AI. So I used ChatGPT, but I found two points you mentioned that I had a lot of trouble with. Is number one, if I had a complex file and I needed tests written, I found if I gave it to ChatGPT and said, hey, I need to cover, let's say, 99% of the code, and here are the steps, it would mock almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell it, don't mock it, you're not actually covering any code here. But, oh, no problem, I will mock it, and then we'll mock the mock. How do you get it to stop?
You have to give it an example. The tests are one of the main places I see where you need to get it started. You give it 1 or 2 tests and say, this is the structure and the flavor of the test that I want you to write. And it could say, this is a very placeholder type of test, and I need you to flesh it out more and to do more steps and more cases and more tests and things like that, but this level of mocking or this level of interactivity and things like that, and it's really good about that.
Another thing you mentioned, you said about typing, just let it do its thing because it's going to do it properly even if we don't necessarily care about that. I've had that a lot, and I've also had where I'll say, okay, just get rid of this function, instead do it this way, and it would actually implement a ton of code for backwards compatibility that I don't care about. Is that is that part of the same thing? I notice it's along the same lines where it either tries making sure all the types match, and it'll also try making sure all of my functions match even if I'm not using them anymore.
Yeah, you'd have to like make that part of the prompt, and you could yell at it, say, this is not what I'm looking for, and it'll learn that over time to be more pragmatic and less defensive, essentially.
And then there's one more question. It was triggered by one of your points that I think you might have accidentally skipped over, although I'm not sure. It said long sessions versus short sessions. I don't know if that's specifically a Claude thing, but it triggered this question is, like, I'll see if I'm having a conversation with it about, longer scripts. Sometimes it's often, I get much better results by just taking the last output, deleting that conversation, starting fresh, because I feel like it sends everything.
You get
Is
stuck,
Yeah.
stuck in a loop.
Yeah, because it's reading the entire conversation. Is that normal, or?
Yeah, so Claude actually you could fork a conversation, you can clear context when you're doing that. There are different ways of doing that. I don't know what's happening right now. But there are different techniques for that, but it's a known problem. 4.6 is much better about that, especially the way it compacts conversations. Usually when you compacted a conversation in 4.5 and previous ones, it was over. Like you're trying to get the job done before it compacts it, because at that point you're never going to recover.
So I'll have to look into Claude.
But yeah, 4.6 is very good about that. I did gloss over that point. The point of long versus short conversations. There are like two different schools of thought when it comes to working on features. One is to have Claude like write your whole project. The other is to give Claude a task to do that, and you're going to kind of put those pieces together, or have another Claude put the pieces together. I don't think the first way is like a usable approach. I think that's how we get like major slop. I think if you were involved in the process, that is how you get good results from it. So that is a good catch. I didn't mean to speak about that.
I have a question. So
Yeah, also use.
one of the things that's been annoying me is like it'll write way too much code, like you were saying.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, delete the code, and it goes, no problem. And then it leaves all the comments it wrote to itself. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It won't remove its own comments. It'll just.
Yeah.
You have been able to solve that at all?
Yeah, so in Claude, you could revert the conversation state.
Yeah,
You could revert the comments, you could revert the code.
Just delete everything, and like this whole file you don't need, because it deletes most of the file, and then it leaves the comments for itself for later in case it needs it.
Yeah. Yeah, you just said, that's whatever. That's an LLMism,
So it puts in code comments,
Uh-huh.
everything you told it not to do.
Right.
So it says we're doing this, not this, and not this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not this.
I have that a lot with ChatGPT.
Right, so
You
one
told
of,
me not to do this, I won't.
one of the things I have in the Claude file is to look at the existing code base to understand the level of comments to add. So like don't Uncle Bob level the comments, and don't take the other extreme. Like kind of a good happy medium. Like the code should explain when something weird is happening, or why it's happening, things like that, and when it makes sense. And yeah, you at some point you have your own code before LLMs existed, hopefully.
Is there still any point in leaving comments beyond?
For yourself,
Or should you leave like the actual plan file?
I don't use plan files. I just have I prompt it and give it.
It has the plan file. What do you mean?
I get rid of them.
Yeah, but there are people, I've seen people that just commit them.
Yeah, I think that's slop.
That's.
I find it slop. Because it's just like there's no point to it. It just accumulates, and it's just cruft that never goes away. And you need plans from 3 years ago when none of that code still exists.
When you blame a piece of code and you go back to it and you find the PR and you find the plan in the PR.
It's documentation that goes out of sync. It's the type
Yeah,
of
but you find the blame and you
Yeah.
know why it was done at the time it was done.
yeah, but that's
It's like
that's too many steps
It's
for.
like a good PR description. You
Yeah.
can always get back from a blame. That's what the plan is. It's not for perpetuity. It's when you go digging.
I know, but it just leaves 1,000 plan files, and it's just okay. I think let's take comments offline, I guess, and I guess we'll yeah. What?